all your life you're told milk is good for you, calcium, calcium. And then when you figure out that this is poison, and then they've been feeding it to you out of love, you start questioning, okay, if I believed this lie all my life, what other lies are there?
A lot of monks there consume meat, even though Buddhism #1 principle is ahimsa. When I asked the monk what's the best way of advocating for this, he just told me, show, don't tell.
If you want to create change, you have to expose yourself to the other side. You may disagree, but continue to have that conversation. And then maybe after a few years, the penny will drop.
If you saw a baby cow, your instinct would never be to just go and kill it. It would always be to pet it. The meat industry is feeding us this idea.
We know that the plant-based diet is so much better for us and the planet, and it's healthy. Today, if someone told me that you have to eat meat or you'll die, I'd rather die.
Here today to explore what it truly means to create meaningful change. And this is not a conversation about just food. It's about courage, it's about purpose, and it's about impact. All of these women joining me today have made it their life's mission to challenge the status quo, whether it's through health, whether it's through nutrition, entrepreneurship, community building. And I cannot wait to dive into their stories, hear about their vision and what keeps them going. I'm going to start with you, Ashti. This is our second conversation for today. We recorded a long podcast, and I don't know how she's not tired of me already. But Ashti, as you all know, was a former pilot. She was a captain with Indigo Airlines who was transformed into a health coach, nutritionist, and chef. She shares delicious recipes on her Instagram. So if you don't follow her yet, please do so right now. She's on a mission to help people reclaim their health through plant-based living. She does that through practical, science-backed approach and has inspired countless of people to move past food guilt, embrace balance, and lead healthier lives. Welcome, and thank you for being here. So Smita, I'll move on to you. You're a multi-passionate innovator in ethical entrepreneurship. You built India's first vegan restaurant, and now you mentor brands to infuse purpose and compassion into their businesses. Your philosophy of joyful living shines through everything you create, from food to conscious businesses. Welcome, and thank you for being here. Next up, we have Sarah Edwards. Sarah has created a unique space where plant-based food meets mindful movement. You've got a team cheering for you right there. Through Copper and Cloves and the studio, she's not just promoting sustainability, but fostering a community and healthier lifestyle that are rooted in intentionality, mindful living, and consciousness. Thank you, Sarah. Welcome. Last up, we have none other than our Namu, founder of Namu Recommends. The reason we're all here today, a huge round of applause. Look at what you've created. Thank you for bringing all of us together, and thank you for doing what you do. For those of you who don't know, Namu has built a career in empowering vegan businesses and showcasing plant-based living. As the founder of Kinkini Art Gallery and Namu Recommends Vegan Market, she's connecting people, businesses, to a vision of sustainability that is collaborative, that is accessible, practical, and inspiring. Thank you, Namu. Thank you for having us. I want to start off by asking all of you, being a change maker in any space is challenging, but especially in veganism, there's so much criticism. There's so much pushback. A lot of times there's hate. But for those of us who are sitting with the truth, it's even harder to keep going. What gives you the strength and courage to keep pushing the plant-based lifestyle and veganism in a world that sometimes feels like it's against it? I'll start off with you, Namu.
Well, as you know, Namu Recommends has grown into quite a large movement right now. But it just takes one story to make me, even if I get feedback, good feedback from one person, it could be a stall owner, it could be a visitor, or someone who writes a DM on Instagram. Just one story and helping one person makes it worth it for me. You see? So, for example, my very first tiny market, which had only 13 stalls, there was a teenage girl and her mom. And they're from a family of 4, and only the girl was vegan. And the rest of the family were hardcore non-vegetarians. So, when she came to the market, she told her mom, "Mom, I've met my tribe." So that she felt like she belonged. That made me feel really good. And so it's like small stories like this. Of course, there are other stories like, for example, the executive chef of the lounges and of the new T2, Terminal 2 of the Bengaluru airport, comes to our markets quite often. And to find out, he's not vegan himself, but he's an ally. He likes to make all of his restaurants vegan friendly. So he met one of our vendors, and it was One Good. He met Abhay selling his milk, and he picked One Good as the brand for all of the lounges and all of the cafes at the airport. So it's things like that makes it all worth it. Thank you.
I love that. I love that so much. It's about planting seeds, as you said, even if it's one person. I think that's what's important, because I've come to realize that to build a vegan world, if we're ever going to get to that, it just starts with small changes. And the more seeds you plant, I think that'll somehow bloom into a forest, hopefully. But the more people listen to it, listen to the conversations, even if it changes one person, the number of animals that they're going to save throughout the year, I think I just keep thinking about one person and the animals, and that just keeps you going. What about you, Sarah?
Yeah, I think similarly, so at Copper and Cloves, we don't really, our vegan ethos isn't our main branding. We try to keep it a little bit, we're trying to make it very inclusive for everyone, basically. So we always say that both vegans and non-vegetarians, and I think we're going to use that term hardcore non-vegetarians, that comes up so much. So we often have families coming, and there'll be at least a couple of people there that will be like, so I'm a hardcore non-vegetarian, so what am I going to eat? And I always recommend the jackfruit taco. And just like you, like when people leave feeling like they've had a really good meal, that they feel satisfied, that they feel like everything was delicious, then like that this idea of planting that seed, like they may not turn vegan the next day, but I know from experience that for me, the transition to becoming fully vegan was made a lot easier by the fact that I was aware that there was amazing vegan food out there. It was easier because it didn't feel like, oh God, what will I eat? I'd already been exposed to really good vegan food, not just like from my own kitchen, but from, restaurants I'd visited and one of my best friends being vegan. So I feel that exactly that kind of situation where somebody really feels like, okay, because a lot of people come to our cafe and they say, I've never eaten vegan food. Sometimes like having a fully vegan meal and just really enjoying it. And a lot of people also don't realize that we're a vegan cafe. Someone approached me today and said, I only just realized you're a vegan cafe. And they're regular customers of ours. So I feel like for that, I really enjoy that, obviously. I really enjoy it when someone goes, wait, what? This whole meal is vegan? That's always a really great moment. But the other aspect for me is the community building part. Like Namu, it's really, really important that Copper and Cloves feels like a space for everyone. That's why we also opened the studio where we could do lots of events that bring people together. The food is always vegan. The events are always vegan in every way. But there's an element of just like bringing people together and making connections for people who may feel isolated. And that's another way of showcasing the empathy and compassion of veganism without it being the most prominent part of the message of the actions that we're doing. And yeah, for me, that really does give me a lot of joy.
And that's super important. I feel like community is such an important aspect of being vegan, because you face resistance most often, even in your family. When you first go vegan, your family doesn't get it, your friends don't get it. But I have found the reason to keep going in the community that we've built, in the community that you find. And that's, I think, my reason to keep going as well. It's the kind of people that you meet. You only lose people who are not meant for you, but you find your people.
Yeah.
through doing the work that you're meant to do. Thank you for that, Sarah. I'll move on to you, Susmita.
Yeah, so, just like any change, any social change, or anything where you're breaking even a small cultural norm, the secret is to not make a big deal of it and be like, okay, see, I'm vegan, so this is what it is. The more you are confident about being yourself, and you don't even have to be defensive, you don't have to justify anything. You have, like, when I turned vegan, and this was a couple of decades ago, and it's very different now. It's so easy now. So many people even know what vegan is. Back then, people just thought, what, you're not going to drink animal milk anymore? You must have lost your mind, right? Or family, like, okay, your bones are going to crumble like a vampire who's been staked. Just, so it's very different now. But the thing is, throughout, the more confident we are as ourselves, I just bake a chocolate cake and I would eat it. I would give to people, and the energy that I embodied around it was always, if you don't eat it, your loss. If you have a mental block, your loss. So when we started our restaurant, it was in 2013, and it was India's first vegan restaurant. Now, running a food business, as all these ladies know, is hard. It's a lot of hard work. For me, I'm like, that effort is worth it only because I'm putting the message out there. So we had animal rights posters all over the walls. We had, leaflets from FIAPO, PETA, all these. We would build a community. And then whoever is non-vegan, and about 60% of people who came to dine with us were vegetarians, about 20% non-vegetarians, and 20% vegans. So, I was just unapologetic. Vegan food, and this is how vegan food is, and if you don't have it, you're lost. And that helped. So then that, as I said, with anything in life, when we are so confident about ourselves, people start doubting their own doubts. They can't make fun of you because they're like, okay, whatever, you don't know what you're talking about. So I feel like, yeah, the more, if you get pushback, if people try to argue with you, you don't even have to get angry, just be yourself and be more yourself without hesitation.
Everywhere I go, I think loudly, proudly, I claim that I'm vegan.
Exactly.
Yeah. But what you said is absolutely true. And I asked this to a monk in Thailand. There's a community in Bangkok, Santi Asok. And all the monks there are vegetarian, and they were kicked out of the main Buddhist community because they're vegetarian, because a lot of monks there consume meat, even though Buddhism #1 principle is ahimsa. And when I asked the monk, what's the best way of advocating for this, and how do you talk to, your devotees? And he just told me, show, don't tell. When you glow and when you're living your best life, you're either, people come to you and ask you, what is it that you're doing? And that's how, that's true advocacy. That's what I believe in. Have the best body, get in the best shape, wear the best clothes, eat the best food, and let them come and ask you, how did you do it? And what is it that you're doing? How's your skin glowing? My acne cleared up as soon as I went off dairy. When people tell me your skin is glowing, I'm like, yeah, plant-based. It's because I'm plant-based. Your lashes are great, I'm like, yeah, that's because I'm vegan. Anything that I have, that's great, it's because I'm vegan. So just show, don't tell, or show and tell, do both. Do it all. But you have to look good, and we have to make veganism look good. So I think I fully agree with you. I'm not in the show, don't tell, I'm in the show and tell. Do both. Ashia, move on to you.
I think I totally agree with that too. And as you get older, and I see a lot of vegans as well who are vegans for ethical reasons, but then they go out and they're eating junk food. And I'm like, if you love the animals so much and you're so compassionate about the animals, what about having some compassion for yourself? Like, why don't you take a little bit of time and eat some healthy food? Because you will be able to work better. You'll be able to advocate better for the animals. And that's why I think like we have to be like walking, talking role models for the vegan movement. And I totally agree with that. But back to your question about what keeps me going. I turned vegan for ethical reasons, and for me, it's always the animals that keep me going. It's a very weird feeling, but like for me, it's like I today, if someone told me that you have to eat meat or you'll die, I rather die because I'm not going back. But of course, we're in another space where we know that the plant-based diet is so much better for us and the planet, and it's healthy. And if you do it right, you can actually, live longer. So that is one of my, reasons for doing this. But the other thing is also food, like Sarah mentioned. Like I am a big foodie, and nobody could satisfy my taste buds once I turned vegan. So I had to learn how to cook. And that's what I did. And I realized that the only way to change people was to make them eat this delicious food. And then when they have that reaction and they're like, oh, this is vegan, then their mind opens up. Because not everyone gets the connection between animals and compassion and ethics, and that's fine, because we're not here to judge everyone. We're here to get everyone on this lifestyle in whatever way we can. So if I'm putting out a recipe and I'm sharing a recipe of a cake or anything, and it has, by chance, it doesn't have any animal ingredients, but it's delicious, I think that's going to open everyone's mind, and it's going to be like, oh, so if I can get the same taste without using animal products, then why not? So I think that's where I am right now, if that answers the question.
It does. Thank you. We've all been non-vegans before. I was born vegetarian, so I wasn't born vegetarian, I was raised vegetarian. So I definitely consumed a lot of dairy. I wore leather. I bought down jacket. My winter clothing was animal-based. And I remember we've either made fun of vegans, we've either said we're never going to do it. I couldn't imagine life without dairy. So having been on that side where we've been non-vegans, and now coming on this side where our ethics are aligned, and whether we're doing it for health, animals, or the planet, is there a message you have for the non-vegans or the younger version of yourself that was non-vegan? What would you like to tell them?
So I was raised as a non-vegetarian. I'm Mangalorean, so we grew up with a lot of fish, but mostly fish and chicken, not so much red meat. When I was a teenager in school, I went vegetarian after attending a talk by Maneka Gandhi. And this is about 30 years ago. So veganism wasn't really around at that time. There was no awareness. So she told us about, the truth about the slaughterhouses and what happens. And it was an easy decision. And I was vegetarian for 7 years. But, after doing it all wrong, when you're vegetarian, when you do it as an ethical vegan, like you were talking about, and nobody knew anything about balanced meals back then. So I was just eating pizza and bread and cereal and that too. This is through my college years in the US.
Instant noodles.
You know how things are, in the US. So I did it all wrong, and I wasn't in the best of health. And I thought that once I learned about protein and balanced meals, and in my 20s, I ate chicken and fish again. But your question was yes. And then, and my husband was non-vegetarian at that time too. And if we ever were invited to a vegetarian person's house, we would roll our eyes, and we'd be like, oh, this is going to be so boring. And I know that people must think that when they come to our house, but I roll my eyes at them when they come because I'm a generous host. I make sure that the food is really tasty. And if they're really that hardcore non-veg, then I'm like, eat your meat and come to my house, but I'm not going to serve it to you in my house. I'm going to serve you really delicious food. Yeah, so my whole thing, like you said, is making it look good. I'm making veganism cool. I make it, tasty. I'm taking it to the mainstream. I expose all of my guests to good vegan food. I, literally stalk all of the chefs, whoever I know. I'm like, hi, add vegan options and I'll give you business, So that's what I do. And this whole thing that you see over here behind you is my way of creating PR for veganism. Okay, I do believe that activism comes in all forms, and they're all really important. You know, Sarah serving the food, you know, is really important. The vegan food, making it tasty and making non-vegans, you know, eat it. That, you know, what is it called? The cube of truth is really important. The activists who pass out the flyers and the leaflets and tell us the truth, show it to us in our face. That's really important. But I think everybody, once you're a vegan, you can use your voice in whichever way that you feel comfortable, however you feel empowered. I feel really empowered. This is something that comes very naturally to me, you know, putting a thing like this together, obviously with my team, but this comes naturally to me. So, so I believe that, you know, I'm making it look good. That's my strategy.
You do a damn good job.
Thank you.
Your question around, you know, what would you say, or what would you do? How would you influence my younger self? Definitely, even though it's not the kind of advocacy that how I choose to show up as a vegan, I really do, like you said, believe that exposure, and really when at the right moment, you can really help someone to suddenly see the truth. I think it's so easy to completely occlude the reality of the situation of slaughterhouses, of the pain of industrial farming, and just live in a bubble. And that helping people to burst that bubble is a really important part of advocacy. For me, it did literally change everything. But the nutrition, the health, the making vegan food taste good, look good, feel cool, feel like it's on point, like it's on the pulse, is the other part of it. Because I still wasn't willing to give up eggs and fish because of like health and nutrition reasons. I thought like I really struggled to give up eggs. Then again, I sort of had this moment of realization that no, I can't do this anymore. But that part was really difficult because at that point I had studied nutrition and I was worried about protein and I was into health. And that was when the food part of it really came in. I think that understanding about plant-based protein, being able to cook it, being able to make it taste good was what gave me the confidence to really make the final, get over the line of veganism. So I knew I wanted to from an ethical perspective. But it was kind of, I had my reservations about protein. So yeah, I feel that there's an element of both, right? There's an element of like, if I could go back to my younger self and say like, this is how vegan food can taste and look and feel, and this is how much variety you could have in your diet, like how I eat now. I eat most of my meals at my own cafe, but how I cook at home as well. Like, it's easy. It doesn't feel like a hardship. It doesn't feel like, you know, as a foodie that I'm suffering or that I'm missing out. But also that reality check, you know, the bubble that meat eaters live in, like, it does have to be burst sometimes, but it can be done gently. So, yeah.
You're right about the bubble and the cognitive dissonance, especially because we all say we love animals. Everyone, you know, when there's a dog that's being abused, you see enraged, like they're enraged all over social media. But at the same time, you know, they are the ones eating other animals. So there's that cognitive dissonance. When we say that we love animals, it usually means like our pets, dogs and cats.
Yeah.
So Dr. Melanie Joy's book was so powerful, Why We Love Dogs, Eat Pigs and Wear Cows. The lack of disgust, it's not that we don't have empathy, it's just that there's disgust missing when we eat other animals. But when you think of eating a dog or a cat, there's that connection.
Yeah.
So just social conditioning that we need to get over and understand that to align with our ethics when we say we love animals, it means all animals.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to have compassion for non-vegans, because I don't think I don't think any of us were walking around being like, I don't care, I'll just, you know, I don't care about suffering and I would kill that animal myself, like whatever. No one was like that. It was just cognitive dissonance. It was a complete lack of like connection of if you saw a baby cow, you would never go, and your instinct would never be to just go and like
stab
kill it. It would always be to like pet it.
Yeah.
But you're somehow, and it's largely through social conditioning and advertising and marketing, like the meat industry is like feeding us this idea that that act of killing that animal isn't connected, but it is, obviously. And I think anything that can be done to make someone aware of that without calling them evil and shaming them is the right way to go about it. And I think as activists, it's important to find, to use your judgment in the moment to know, is it, is now the time to throw facts, or is now the time to, give someone a delicious taco? You have to judge each situation as it's a unique context. It might be context, it might be the person, it might be how you're feeling that day, but there's different ways of doing it, and each person can kind of show up in each situation differently.
There's a fantastic new documentary. It's called I Could Never Go Vegan. It's just come out. And there's a scene in that documentary where there's a couple ordering food at a restaurant, and they order chicken nuggets. And they get a live chicken. And they're asked to slaughter the chicken. And of course, they're not able to do it. So I highly recommend watching that documentary. Because if most people had to kill their own food, they wouldn't do it. Yeah. On to you.
So I grew up a vegetarian, and I loved milk. I mean, not just dairy in general, but it's kind of pukish to talk about it now, but I would drink plain, unsweetened, glugged down milk, So then...
Every mother's dream. Literally, if you didn't eat Bournvita or Horlicks mixed into it.
I wasn't even like that as a kid. When I grew up, somebody said your hair is going to grow very well if you have milk. So then every night I drink a glass of milk and go to sleep. And then we all know, it has casomorphins. You get addicted to it. So it's like pure addiction. And I got addicted to it. So then when my husband went vegan first, and I thought, who is this person I've just married? And I kept trying to bring him back. I thought it's a phase. There's no way. Who's going to live without milk? It's deprivation. So I would bake some cake. I wasn't even a good baker back then, but I'd bake it and try to tempt him. But he stuck to it very strongly. And he would never lose the opportunity. If I picked up a big glass of milk, we were in the US then, so in India, we'd have the milk where you'd have to boil, whatever. There you get that full fat milk, in the big cartons. You just pour it and drink. And every time I reach for a glass, he'd be like, you know how many million pus cells are in that glass of milk? And I'm like, I thought he was just kidding. But then he was insistent enough to just stick to him being vegan that I got curious. And then once you get curious, you find out about the cruelties in the dairy industry. And I was horrified. And this is in a country like India, where we're watching cows going up and down the street with the honking and the baby being tied away. We see all of it, but so much dissonance, So when I found out about it, and I'll admit I'm not even a typical animal lover. I don't go like, doggy, pet them. I'm not none of that. So you don't need to be an animal lover to be vegan. You just should realize you don't have to be a jerk to them. That's it, right? So then I went vegan for animal rights. And back then, there wasn't much knowledge about the environmental benefits, the health benefits, all these things. I just started getting healthier, and I'm like, oh, how did I get healthier? And it was a year later that I found out that milk is directly related to respiratory illnesses, formation of phlegm and things like that. And I was like, so much, I'd fall sick every 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and that just stopped. And I'm like, oh, bonus. And then I've been into Reiki, meditation and all that since my teenage years. So then after I went vegan, I could meditate better. I felt better energy levels and, spiritually also. Everything I later, in hindsight, I started realizing everything connects back to going vegan. So then I have to admit, I went vegan for the animals, but I stayed vegan for purely selfish reasons. It's amazing. It's changed every aspect of my life. I became a chef because I turned vegan. All these dairy alternatives, all these familiar ingredients, you can make curds with peanuts. It was just mind-blowing to me. I ran a vegan restaurant because I don't think I would have been a restaurateur if I hadn't gone vegan. Every part of my life, in multiple ways, it changed. It also opened up my mind because all your life you're told milk is good for you, calcium, milk is good for you. So then you believe your parents, your grandparents, whoever, you believe what they tell you. And then when you figure out that this is poison and then they've been feeding it to you out of love, you start questioning. You're like, okay, if I believed this lie all my life, what other lies are there? I'm like, yes. So then it helped me become, again, more confident, questioning social norms. I can even say I'm a feminist only because I turned vegan. I don't even think that exists. It's not, I have to be compassionate, but also the hard truth is you can't be a feminist and then not be vegan because it's the use of the female body in whether it's the egg industry, the dairy industry, it's terrible. So if I have to say something to maybe a non-vegan who is considering going vegan or something to my younger self, don't think you know everything. Open your mind out. You hear this new idea, don't be afraid to try it. Because usually it's the fear. Because you're so used to, having this milk and curds and ghee. It's a fear that holds people back. Like you said, nobody is like, oh, I'll go kill a cow. So you are compassionate anyway. At least most people are. So lean into it. Don't be afraid to lean into it. And if you have any pushback from people around you, which will happen. Nobody likes anybody changing among them. Nobody likes it. Just because they are uncomfortable about it, you don't have to make yourself a little smaller, softer. No. They will, the same people who are probably arguing with you right now, convincing you to stop going vegan, they're going to come back to you 5 years, 10 years later and ask you advice about going vegan. Right? And they'll tell their friends, they hear the word vegan, they're like, oh, this friend, I have a friend who's vegan. I have a cousin who's vegan. So don't be afraid, just try it.
First they mock you and then they want to join you. Beautiful story. When people look at veganism as a sacrifice, as you're giving up something, no milk, no egg, no poultry, no silk, no leather, they're like, oh my God, you're giving up so much. And I've stopped using the word giving up. Like I can't have this. I choose not to have it. But I didn't give up anything. The only thing I gave up is dogma, social conditioning, and abiding by something that I knew was not good for me. So I started questioning things and I started living more intentionally and more mindfully. So I've only gained by going vegan. I've not given up anything. I've not sacrificed anything. Until today, it's the best decision I've ever made. And the only thing I regret is not doing it sooner. And I think most vegans have that regret. I wish I'd done it sooner. Is your vegan husband here, by the way? Is he? Can I? Well, hi. I know you mentor businesses, but do you mentor vegan husbands as well? Because my mother's looking for a son-in-law. So if you do provide that service, I'd love for more men to go vegan. Anyone listening to this? So it's a great business idea.
I think Shreya is moving to Bangalore soon, right?
I am. I have to. My whole community is here, so I definitely have to. But when a non-vegan guy comes, there'll be one more reason. And not the non-vegan, the vegan guy, sorry. The non-vegan turned vegan guy. Vegan. No, I said that.
Okay, so my journey started about 9 years ago. I was a hardcore non-vegetarian. I would eat meat every single day. And if there was no meat on the table, I wouldn't have the meal. I'm ashamed to admit it, but that was me. So I grew up in a Punjabi family and we ate a lot of meat. I didn't eat too much dairy. I was lactose intolerant, like most of us growing up. And thankfully, my mom kind of made the connection when I was younger. I used to get like a lot of like coughs and, irritations in my throat. And she kind of cut dairy from my diet, which is great. Well, at least milk she didn't force me to have. But I ate a lot of meat. So, and it wasn't just chicken like most Indians. I was eating beef and pork and mutton and every single animal I could eat. And 8 years ago, it was very. It just happened. Like I didn't even know anyone who was vegan at that time. There was one friend I knew who was vegan, and I'd never heard of the term. She came home for lunch one day and I was asking her, like, how can you, because I really loved beef. And I was like, how can you give up beef? Like, I could maybe turn vegan, but like, how can you stop beef? And she looks at me and she's like, have you ever looked into the eyes of a cow? And I'm like, no, why would I look into the eyes of a cow? And that was that conversation. In the evening, I open up my laptop and there's a PETA video waiting for me on YouTube, of course. And it's an 8-minute video talking about one girl's journey to vegan. And it basically was literally me, who was this girl who claimed to love animals. And at that time, I was volunteering at an animal shelter. I was going every week and walking these dogs and bathing them. And at the same time, I was coming home every single day and eating my mutton and chicken and beef and pork. And I just never made the connection because there was so much cognitive dissonance. And that video kind of highlighted that to me. And that day, I kind of decided that there is something I need to change in my life. At the same time, I was like into health and fitness and I was using meat for protein and I was like, how am I going to get my protein anymore? But I was actually very strong in the way that the way I saw it was like, I just don't want to be a hypocrite anymore. But I didn't do it overnight. It took me 6 to 8 months to turn vegan. I learned a lot in that journey. I watched every single documentary out there. I did a few plant-based courses. I would eat seafood once a week. That was my cheat meal. Because again, for some reason, I didn't make the connection with seafood and I thought they weren't sentient. And that's what a lot of people do, right? Like you can make the connection with bigger animals like cows and goats. But with seafood, you're like, no, they don't feel anything or, they don't matter. But at some point, I had to face the reality that they were also sentient and I had to make this decision. So it took me 6 months. And I think over the course of those 6 months, I also realized that how it is the best diet for my health. At that time, I was flying. I was a pilot with Indigo Airlines, and I had my medical every 6 months. And they used to measure my hemoglobin, cholesterol levels, everything. My hemoglobin levels, even though I used to eat red meat at least 3 to 4 times a week, my hemoglobin was 10.5. And the normal is 12 to 16 range for a woman. And the doctor was like, oh yeah, that's normal for a woman. Like, it's okay. And every time before I would go for my medical, I would actually pop pills to increase my hemoglobin levels. But once I turned plant-based, literally in 3 to 4 months, I saw my levels increase. It went up to 14.5, which I'd never seen in my life. And so all of these small things kind of just gave me the sign that this is the best thing, not just for the animals, but also for my health and for the planet. So what was the question? I totally forgot the question.
It was more about what would you tell your non-vegan self or to any non-vegans listening, because we've been on that side where we thought we could never do it. So for anyone sitting maybe on the fence, people who are on the edge, I want to do it, but I don't think I could ever do it because obviously our perspectives have changed. Yeah. We've shifted the way we thought.
I don't know, actually. I don't know what I would tell my younger self because maybe I was just not ready at that time. I think we have to also be ready. And maybe I wouldn't have been such a strong advocate for this lifestyle if I hadn't gone through what I had gone through then. So I wouldn't change anything that happened in my life. But to a non-vegan, I would just make them some delicious food and be like, come home and eat my food. That's all.
Thank you. My last question to all of you, it's multi-pronged, but I'll ask you this before we open up to Q&A. I want to talk about advocacy in the vegan space because it can be especially draining. There's a lot of infighting within the vegan community. I've been guilty of that. I know we're stronger together. I know we're going to be able to achieve a lot more if we collaborate and work with each other. But there's so many times when other vegans also don't find other vegans' definition of veganism correct. They don't find their form of advocacy correct. Some of us will spend so much time hating on other vegans, being like, oh, but you use leather, you do that. I think there are some of us who are already on the right side and we should be spending our time and energy maybe trying to get other people into the movement. But the pressure of doing advocacy in this space, whether that's the emotional toll of watching animal videos, like videos of animal suffering, or whether that's the pressure of constantly having to explain your choices, or knowing that you know the truth and you want to scream as loud as you can, getting other people to see the truth. What is the best way of doing advocacy in this space? What has been the most effective strategies according to you in the years of work that you've done in this space? And how can each of us use the platform that we have, the space that we work in, and our superpowers more than anything else? Because I've seen the Wheel of Climate Ikigai. It is what you love doing, the climate ikigai. So it's the ikigai, but we use that in the climate space as to the work that you love doing, the work that requires, the work that needs to be done, and what can make you money at the same time. So I think what is necessary, what you love doing, and what can make you money all at the same time. So I think of that as where's your superpower, and that's somewhere in the middle. And I genuinely think any one of us who are vegans, who know the truth, and if you're not using your platform, your skill, your talent, or your resources in some way to get other people to become vegan, we're all that animals have. And every day, I mean, we kill 202 million chickens every day. We kill 92 billion land animals for food every single year. I think that's what drives me, that I know I have to keep talking about it, whether that reaches one person or 5 people. And which is why I know advocacy is super important. Talking about this is super important, or even using your talents. It's all we can do. So what is the most effective form of advocacy, and how can more vegans channelize their superpowers and create change?
Well, I touched upon this in your previous question, actually. But one change that I've been through, I would say maybe 10 or 15 years ago, I was more black and white or extreme in my views. You were either on my side, and if you were not on my side, I didn't really want to talk to you. I couldn't really have a healthy conversation about the topic, that we're disagreeing about. And as I've grown older, I've realized that if you want to create change, you have to expose yourself to the other side. As in, you have to surround yourself with those people, and they should know where you stand, and you may disagree, but continue to have that conversation. And then maybe after a few years, the penny will drop. Okay. And this is because actually years ago, I had, someone in my kid's parent community, and she was, a big meat eater, but she was very, very passionate about recycling. And she would just go on and on and on about that. And if there was a birthday party, she'd be like, no, don't do those gifts, and no plastic, and no this. And eventually, we did this joint birthday party with her daughter and my daughter. And it was a zero waste party. I'm the most unpopular mom, for sure, in the class. But, after she just went on and on, the penny dropped with me, just one person. So I feel like for, advocacy, we just have to keep going on and on and on in whichever language that we speak, or whichever form of communication. Yours is a podcast. Ashti is talking about health and recipes. Hers is a restaurant, and Sushmita has a podcast as well. Mine is the vegan market. So just keep, and as you can see, my first market had 13 stalls, the second had 25, the next had 50, the next had 100. Now we're at 120 with panels. We have a festival. Just keep going on is the first thing. Just keep going. And then, interact with the other side. Don't alienate yourself. Of course, one of the biggest advantages, I would say, apart from like my health and everything aligning now, with my views, is the friends that this vegan movement has brought to me. I would say for me is up there. The community, I've made some very, very close friends. But yeah, that would be pretty much it.
going outside the echo chamber.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have to be on the other side and then complain about the lack of vegan options. You know, yeah. I mean, there's only so much I can do. I don't think I can really go to a steakhouse where it's really, you know, but I will go to a non-vegan's house and convince them to make me some vegan food and, you know, have the conversation with the other side and, you know, don't hate them. You were there once. And yeah.
Yeah, because I used to guilt and shame people. I used to be angry, and now I've realized that if I want their buy-in, I have to be nice, even if I don't want to. I have to be nice.
Yeah, I think it's a long process, and we have to be really patient, but use the voice that you have and that you're comfortable with. Ikigai, fortunately, has come very naturally to me over the years. So every venture, you know, I've been channeling my Ikigai. So this is very much in alignment with all of those things that you said. The world needs it. It can, you know, bring people together. I'm good at it, and it can make some money, you know? Yeah.
Thank you.
Agree with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think for me, the food, the cooking part had come naturally. And when I realized that I was like a pretty good plant-based chef and that I could make food taste good, the convincing people that this is a good way to eat, that this isn't a restriction, this isn't about lack, like you mentioned earlier, was the initial way that I did advocacy. And like, even for example, before I had my restaurant, during the pandemic, through a common photographer that was working with both of us. I think Nikhil mentioned this on the panel yesterday, but I just reached out to him and was like, I hear you've just started a vegan pizza range. Do you want to collaborate? Like, I can, because I tried it and it was like, you know, as he said, his earliest products were a little bit in development. I was like, maybe I can help, like, make it like a thing. And reaching out and making that happen. And that's still then like kind of, a lot of people who are not vegan will still like have that pizza. So I think that for me, initially, it was food. It was just sharing my the skills I'd learned in making vegan food taste good. But as you said earlier, Susmita, like getting more confidence that being vegan is my identity. I don't need to hide it. And I also, similarly to you, Ashti, like I found that I was getting healthier and stronger, and all my own reservations around losing muscle mass, not being able to lift as heavy. If I gave up, my final over the line was also eggs and seafood. I was very concerned about that, but I did it anyway. And then much to my great pleasant surprise that I actually got stronger. I'm stronger now. I can lift heavier now than I could 10 years ago when I was both non-vegan and 10 years younger than I am now. So I'm pretty like vocal about that now in my gym, because when we are lifting, you know, everyone is panicking about protein. Like I feel that, you know, when a conversation comes up like about protein, which it does all the time when you're vegan, as I'm sure all the vegans in the room are aware and have experienced that, oh, where are you going to get your protein? What's going to happen? That is the time, like, when I choose to speak up and just subtly, but like quite firmly be clear about how I am still able to build muscle and lift, and I meet my protein goals, and not by being obsessed with protein, but just eating really well and a really good balanced diet. And the same, like, you know, the calcium question, all these things that come up can be like, people don't realize it, but that is your invitation for advocacy. It's them that's opened up the conversation. So that is the chance to throw a fact or to be really firm and confident in your decision. And I think living your best life and showcasing that. And to me, I think we were talking about this earlier. I was not someone that was on social media before I started this business. I wasn't a natural social media update about my life to my family and friends. And that's one of the things I find the hardest now, is like regular posting, creating content to me, that's quite difficult compared to showing up each day at my business, which I love. But the thing that keeps me going is like, I can't just be quiet about this. Like, I do want to show people that I became vegan not for health reasons, but my health has flourished since I became vegan. And I am living a full life. Like, whatever anyone says about veganism being some kind of lack or loss in your life, I would just invite them to look at like the friendships we've made, the businesses we've started, the communities that we've founded, and that we are like a big part of, and tell me, where is the loss? Like, where is the lack in that? So yeah, that's...
I love what you said about content creation as well, because I was so scared of the camera. I used to be a fintech founder. I'd never done content and never been in front of a camera. So when I started the podcast, everyone discouraged me from doing it. People told me I'll do 1 episode, 2 episodes, I'll quit, I'll get 5 views, no one's going to listen to you, no one cares about veganism. We won Podcaster of the Year last year, as in all podcast categories. We've hit 15 million views overall on the channel. So I know there's a market. It's not 5 people, it's 15 million people. So I know we're reaching non-vegans. But the reason I do it, even if I'm insecure about myself or how I look or the way I'm in front of the camera, I just do it for the animals. Yes, exactly. At the end of the day, I'm like, it's not about me, it's about the animals. Like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to put myself out there, as uncomfortable it is, because even if it's reaching one person, as you said, it's making an impact. If someone comes to me and tells me, hey, you know, I'm Jen, I'm also Jen, and I used to use leather before and I no longer use leather now, to me, that's change. That's it. Like, I don't need to go viral. I don't need to, be all over. But if we can reach even a small number of people, I know we're creating change. And that's the only way we create a vegan world. Thank you.
I so agree with that. It's a ripple effect that you create. And sometimes when you start, you don't realize what's happening. It's got a long tail. Today in the market, a lady came to meet me with her daughter, and she's like, about 7 years ago, I'd taken curd starter from you. We use the same culture now till, I was like, oh my God, that makes me feel safe. And curd, precious, right? So you're making a difference. Now, as far as advocacy goes, one thing, when it comes to, like Sarah said, you need to be able to discern, is this the time to drop some hard truths or feed them jackfruit tacos, like she said, right? So in every situation, every person, it changes. And sometimes you have to walk away. Sometimes it's not worth the effort. Whoever's ready for it will come to you. And the less you get into arguments, the more you shift your own energy, and then you attract the right people who really want that information from you, who come to you. They may be a little, resistant to it, but they've come to you for a reason. But the more we go looking for arguments, and especially the infighting that you mentioned, the more we go trying to point fingers at other vegans, other vegan businesses. I've seen like loads of this over the years. Not just us going and arguing with someone, but also it's very important to protect our own energy. Now, if somebody comes and tries to bring you down, and a lot of vegans do it, it's not just the non-vegans, right? You need to be, again, how to step away, how not to respond, how not to feed the troll. That's very important. There was the talk about social media and everything. What I do say is try not to get, or rather make it a habit not to get into arguments online. Everyone, the worst side comes out, when you're anonymously typing on a keyboard. Have real conversations, or create your own space, like the podcast. There are two. Again, you have the outright activism, like Namu's friend, what she was talking about. Yes, there are situations where you have to be outright and do your activism and talk about it and never give in. There is also sneaky activism, like a ninja, on my podcast is called The Feel Good Factor. It's not about veganism necessarily. It's about feeling good. It's about, happiness and joy and everything. But I sneak in veganism once in a while. Dr. Nandita is sitting there. I'm so impressed with her. So she gets people to attend her sessions I'll make you healthy. I'll reverse your diabetes. Come, come, come. Then the whole session will be going about 2 hours. Then she'll play an animal rights video. Total sneaky activism. I love it. So yeah, take an opportunity every chance you get. Be an activist. Don't be afraid. But see where you can be outright, where you can be sneaky. And yes, I'm in agreement with all of them. Food is, the way to people's minds to open it up. That's like the most powerful thing. More powerful than, yes, it's great, go out on the street, talk to people, even we've done that. Yes, but you feed someone something, then, they think, okay, I'm not deprived anymore. That deprivation thing, that myth gets wiped out immediately. So everyone who's vegan, I say learn to cook, learn at least to some extent. If your family, especially if you're living in a family and you are the main person cooking for your family, you're in a position of power. You don't even have to tell your family this is vegan food or anything at first. Don't even make a big deal. Just start cooking and feeding it to them. Somewhere down the line, drop, oh, yeah, you've been eating vegan all along. Right? So take your chance at either sneaky activism, outright activism, anything, and protect your energy. That's very, very important because we are seeing so much of cruelty. It hurts us. Sometimes you're sitting at a table where people you love and respect are consuming dairy and things like that. It's very painful. But the more you regulate yourself, and there's a saying, the most relaxed and regulated person in the room is the most powerful person in the room. So regulate yourself before going into any situation, I'm all woo-woo, so I talk about energy protection, and then meditation and stuff like that. But you find your way, whatever helps you. Regulate yourself, then step into the room, especially if you think you're going to, say a festival time or a wedding or some occasion where there'll be some pushback. Before that, prepare yourself very, very well. If you think you're going to go into a situation where there may not be vegan food, eat well before you go. And then when you go, pick the few vegan items and fill up your plate so people who see are like, oh, okay, there's vegan food. This person also can have it. So find every possible way. But yes, protect your energy most, whether you're running a vegan business, whether you're doing activism, you're cooking, whatever it is, it starts with you. Take care of yourself. Just because you're passionate about something, don't allow yourself to get burnt out. Don't let that part of your life eat up whoever you are. Because your energy is what is going to shift everybody ultimately. More than your words, more than your actions, your energy that's going to shift.
And you want to live longer for the animals. So the healthier you are, the more you take care of yourself, the longer you're going to be able to advocate and do what you do. But thank you for that. And we all love Dr. Nandita Shah. She's inspired millions of people and touched more lives than you'll ever know. So thank you, Dr. Nandita. And just to touch upon the infighting that you mentioned really quickly, I was at COP29. And we were talking about plant-based food systems. I was with Plant-Based Treaty. And the only reason there's so much talk about regenerative agriculture and the reason sustainable agriculture as plant-based food systems never get spoken about is because the meat and dairy lobbyists, they're so strong. They're so unified. There's so much money in there. So if we could ever create a vegan lobby, we would have to be on the same page. We would need to be just as unified. So there's so much power in working together, in amplifying the right voices, in collaborating and in working together. That's the only way we beat them. It's the same monster. We're all fighting the same monster. We just need to work together.
I think, see, we're all humans, vegans and non-vegans. There are non-vegans who I love and respect and admire, and vegans who are like, oh my God, I'm never going to eat it. I never want to. So we're all humans, right? I think we can't expect that all of us will get along, but what Namu's doing now with the market. Like I've always said, why I love this market is because it's a community. Food and all that is fine, but it's the community. So we just keep building communities and of like-minded vegans around ourselves. And as you said, together we can be strong.
Yeah, I think all of you touched on like everything that I wanted to say. For me, advocacy when I turned vegan was all about trying to shout it from the rooftops that what you're doing is wrong, and trying to shame people for what, for eating meat. And I realized maybe a few years into it that was not the right way, because I was getting burnt out. I was losing friends. I was, having fights with my family members. And it was not the best way to advocate for the vegan lifestyle and the movement itself. I was doing it for the animals, but I was so angry because I just couldn't understand how people couldn't open their eyes to this truth. And I think all of us vegans have gone through that journey where initially you're just so angry. And then I had to come up with ways to be like, how do I get people on my side? How do I, and like you said about Ikigai. So for me, it was food. I realized that, okay, fine, let me go and do a plant-based chef course. I had never cooked in my life, but I was a foodie. So I was like, okay, maybe if I learn how to cook and I show people that you can, eat delicious food and you can make it yourself, and that will open their mind. So that, of course, helps. And that's what I do on Instagram as well. And the other thing that I think for me, health and fitness was always a big part of my life, even before I turned vegan. So like I said, even when I was flying, I was like carrying like my meals, and for dinner, I would have like tandoori chicken for protein because I thought it was healthy. So for now, for me, my advocacy is more towards health and fitness, because I just turned 40. And to me, this decade, when I've been vegan, has been the healthiest decade of my life. And I am seeing the benefits for myself, for my husband, and all of us, friends who are who are eating this kind of diet. So for me, this is like, hey, if you can be the healthiest that you can on a diet like this, and you are saving the animals and you're helping the planet, then why not? So that's where I think I am.
I think we can take questions from the audience if anyone has any. Ranveer?
Okay, so, I have a question regarding being vegan and financial decisions, right? A lot of people work in industries which don't involve anything. Somebody's working in a bank, someone's working in any sector. Now you come to the food industry, because I'm in that's easy for me to ask. You turn vegan overnight. Your businesses are not vegan, right? It takes time to understand that to make money, you still have to continue running those businesses. You keep going down that path. Slowly, you get to change, you get to convert parts of your menu, increase the vegan options. Then you come to a point of saying, okay, do I consult? I've stopped taking consultations of restaurants, for example. Somebody asked me, will you consult my restaurant? Sure, it's a non-vegetarian restaurant, but I get to include 20 vegan dishes, which may have been only 2. But there's a financial decision. I'm making money of a restaurant which is not vegan. Now, this could be in any business. It could be in fashion. It could be in anything. For me, it's one thing. There's another chef I know, a lady, who came to me that day to talk. She's like, Ranveer, I'm working in this restaurant that's not vegan, but I get a lot of shame and guilt because I'm vegan, but I'm still cooking meat in this restaurant, but I do it for financial decisions. Where do we draw a line, and how do you, not draw a line, I think it's everyone's individual reasons, but I see a lot of guilt come into this of making financial decisions and still trying to live a vegan life. So what are your thoughts on that? Anyone can take this.
I can answer this one.
Please.
I think as a vegan, we have to realize that there's no vegan police. Nobody's going to come and be like, hey, you're not vegan enough. We are already doing the best we can by being vegan. And if you have a business which has non-vegan products and it's going to take you some time to transition to a vegan menu, I think that's completely fine. That is just the transition process that you're going to take. It's the same for any other business. Like for me, when I was flying, when I turned vegan, people are messaging me and saying, oh, you fly a plane and you're vegan. And I'm like, okay, I get that. But do you understand that there are passengers who pay for that? It's not that I am just a driver, right? There is a demand for it. So while I can stop flying, there will still be someone else who replaces me. And for a long time, it was in my mind, and it was this conundrum. Like, yeah, I'm flying a plane and I'm adding to the carbon emissions and greenhouse gases and whatever. But for a long time, I couldn't stop flying. I couldn't, and that's just the reality of it. And today, when I can and I am doing something else, I'm able to, like, my ethics, my values, my actions are all aligned. But it can take some time, and that's okay. And don't let anybody shame you for it. That's what I think.
I'd also like to say something. So it is a very individual choice. For example, is it, I don't know, let me ask Karthik, the one in New York, is it 1 Madison Avenue? 11 Madison Avenue. Have you heard of it? Right? So Michelin star, things were going great. Guy turned vegan, turned the whole business vegan. Still going great, still Michelin star, right? So there's a possibility of doing the overnight shift if you choose to go by it. There's also, like Ashti said, it can be a process. Nobody is perfect. None of us is perfect, right? But the only thing to remember is not to use that as an excuse to keep slipping back. If you have the opportunity to make more changes, if you have, if say your friend who's the chef, who's cooking, who's a vegan but cooking in a non-vegan, if that person if she has the opportunity to work at a vegan place with just earning just as well, of course she'd, yeah, there we go. No, fair enough. No, I'm okay. Reasoning. Okay. Yeah. Yes. And so it's all about, we're trying to do the best we can, and honestly try to do the best you can. If there is an opportunity to make a difference, in a better way, do it in alignment with your ethics. Because even mentally, emotionally, it doesn't feel good if you are a vegan and then you are actually directly contributing. It's not good. So it's actually brave of her to say that, okay, I'm going to turn the menu slowly vegan from inside, because she's going through something very difficult to be able to do that, right? But as long as somebody doesn't use that financial thing as an excuse to just keep, promoting non-vegan stuff, that's all. We just need to, so there's no vegan police, there are vegan police. My husband and I were laughing at each other. But just don't care about what anyone says. You police yourself as best as you can, watching yourself, right? And do the best you can. And yes, be careful about, how you use the word vegan though. That also matters, right? Say, for example, somebody is vegan in terms of food, but their business is leather. They need to call themselves plant-based, because if you're selling leather, that way, just be respectful of it, because it's a very hard-earned, people had to fight to get that label so that there's some clarity. It's not about being great. It's about clarity of what vegan is. So as long as that is clear, I believe it's okay too. And in today's world, there are many, many opportunities. So it's changing. It's getting better for the vegans in terms of finances too.
I mean, I think shame and guilt towards oneself is toxic, and it's something that everybody, that nobody deserves. I mean, we have to both move towards living in alignment, and constantly shaming ourselves isn't the vehicle to do that. Actually allowing ourselves to just to really lean into our values and think about how things make us feel is for me anyway, what enabled me to finally take those final decisions to become fully vegan, it was all about alignment, right? It was like, I want to keep eating eggs and seafood, but it feels so wrong at this point that I would rather be weak and less healthy than to live with this kind of feeling. But purposefully kind of guilting and shaming ourselves isn't helpful. And I think I struggle with this because I am vegan and I have a vegan business and I have become vegan in the sense of, you know, leather and what I wear and everything. But my dog and my cat aren't vegan. So I rescued those animals. I didn't buy them from a breeder, but they're not vegan. So sometimes I mean, this is a genuine dilemma that I face, and I would love thoughts on this because sometimes I feel like then that's still speciesism, right? I'm still purchasing meat products, which I can't even, I dread to think about the dog and cat food industry, meat industry. But, you know, for various reasons, we haven't transitioned them like to a vegan diet because I don't know how to. And that's something which I personally really struggle with. And I think that's why this like moral dilemma question is very interesting. It's not just financial. It's actually true of a lot of us who are vegan, but actually there is that one little thing in our lives. It might be financial. It might be our pets and what we feed them. It might be, certain other lifestyle choices, buying a car and whatever, like things that we miss or things that we're not yet ready to transition. It's not going to help anyone or the animals or the movement to sit there and sit in our own shame and you know, I think actually this is where we have to come together. I think that's why your question is so good. Like, throw it out there. Like, we're all struggling with this. And I think as we've discussed, we have to come together and be honest about the dilemmas that we face, and none of us are perfect. And we shouldn't sit in our own shame and try to hide it. We should actually share it, which is why I think it's such an important question.
Just something small to add. I think that expanding your community is going to really help you. Reach out to all the vegan professionals in the food industry and build that community. And just by doing that, it'll help you with your transition in a very organic way. So there may not be too many in Goa or wherever it is, you know. So reach out to everybody, you know, via Sarah. Everybody in the food industry, you know, Sarah will connect you to the next. And by sort of building that community, it's going to lead to something. And it'll help you with transitions, and it will help you with business as well.
He is. It's his friend.
No. Transitioning your work. Yeah. Yes.
There are reasons why you also don't, you pick and choose your battles, right? And you do what you can. So, I guess
I think community is the answer for so much.
Right. No, it's exactly like she said about pets. For example, we feed 700 animals a day, twice a day, right? But we do feed them the leftover scrap of chicken, which is bought. Now, that is a moral dilemma. But I'd rather feed 700 animals than not. So just keeps lying there.
Just to add to the family business side of things, because I struggled with that, and I've made peace with it, saying I look at it as redistribution of wealth. If I can take from one source that's non-vegan, because where are vegans going to put in their money? In vegan businesses. And if you look at where I spend my money, it's literally on just vegan businesses. So there's this whole stigma around vegans wanting to make money and vegans like being rich as well. But I think vegans should be rich. Like, vegans should make money because we're only going to fund and invest in the vegan world. So I don't think there should be any shame around that. So yeah, I just look at it as redistribution of wealth. I wouldn't promote a non-vegan business, but if there's money coming in from that, I'd just look at it as redistribution into a vegan business, because I'm not buying anything that's non-vegan. So I think that's how I would just make peace with it, because you do need financial sustainability to be able to do what we do as well. And it's just going to make us better advocates. And let's be honest, a lot of vegan businesses don't have the money. If I just decide I only want to work with vegan businesses, they are small. So a way that I can work with them for free is maybe by working with other non-vegan businesses and making sure I'm just promoting and amplifying the right businesses, if that helps. Maybe one last question before we end. If anyone else has a question, we could take one last question. Yeah? Go ahead.
We all have pets, and I have a cat. We tried to transition her to veganism, but she wouldn't eat the vegan food. So do you have any brand suggestions which give vegan cat food, or like we
What's
can
it
make
called? Curry and
our
pepper.
animals vegan?
Cats, yeah.
Dogs, all the animals, because feeding animals and other animals is like treachery, like feeding a pig pork.
I love that question so much. There's a brand I know, it's called Paws for Greens. There's one Indian brand, and I think there's another one that's called Woof.
Yeah, and curry and pepper as well. They've
Curry
also
pepper.
been at the market, previous markets. It's supplements and treats, vegan treats.
I can share one with you as well, which I give my dog. It's a vegan kibble. It's actually really good. She loves it. For cat food, I don't know. I think in India, it's a little hard to find vegan cat food because they need a different kind of diet than dogs. But I mean, if anybody knows about vegan, Benevo. But Benevo, do they still have? Yeah, Benevo has cat food, the canned ones. Yeah. Benevo, right? Yeah, Benevo. Huh? Benevo. Benevo. On their website. Best. I can share the number with you. I have her number.
Thank you.
So
No problem.
Benevo, just to sum it up for her, Benevo, Paws for Greens,
And I'll check the
You
one
said
on
curry.
Amazon.
Curry and pepper.
curry and pepper.
Curry and pepper.
There's
I
three.
have one which I'll just tell you.
I know dogs
Babe,
can be
what's the
omnivores. I
brand
wasn't sure
that we give
about
Lola?
cats. Yeah, I'm not sure about cats. I know dogs can definitely thrive. Dogs can thrive on a plant-based
On
diet.
Amazon.
I know a lot of dogs who are vegan. There's another one, Woof something. I can't remember the name of that, but we can maybe send a few to you. But I know dogs can definitely be plant-based. Cats, I'm not an expert in cats.
Sorry, if I may. Even with dogs, because this is information that you guys might implement, I think it's important to note that even with dogs, it's important to transition them slowly because they've built it up over years, especially if they're like 10 years old and stuff like that. That's important to know. So consult your vet. Obviously, don't go do any of this on your own. So that's all.
Yeah, and most vets will not be on board with this decision. So please consult a vegan vet. I also don't understand that, like when you are saving some animals and then they are not vegan, the vets who aren't vegan, I don't get that. But I think we have Curry and Pepper, who is a nutritionist, a canine nutritionist, and she helps dogs go plant-based and vegan.
Thank you so much for being here with me today, and thank you so much for doing this, and thank you for putting this together and having all of us. I've learned so much, and just the shared bond that we all share, and the experiences that we all go through. So thank you for being here and creating the change that you're all creating, and thank you so much for listening. Thank you.